formed by this deep-seated fear that no one might be there to listen. There's a moving sense of epic loneliness to Adam's story, but also an eagerness to it, since when retelling the story of this experience in Book 8, he does have an audience. The Archangel Raphael has stopped by to see what's up. And he has clearly learned to tell a story by now. Immediately after he expresses the difficulty of telling his and humanity's story, Adam professes to Raphael, and this is line 252, quote, "Desire with thee still longer to converse, induced him to tell it in the first place." Adam's narrative makes clear that this understanding of what happened when he first woke up informs his present conversation with Raphael. That is, both his expressed desire to converse with Raphael still longer and his unexpressed anxiety of losing him are embedded in Adam's story. He is presently narrating his previous first moments, when clearly there's no established story to work from, within an established context of stories, and he is telling it to an audience, Raphael, familiar with this context. In fact, Adam's story in Book 8 indicates the impossibility of Adam telling a story except when there are other stories to refer to and deviate from. His story can only be told in retrospect, once it is situated within a context. Which is why I argue his story comes second. He needs source material to be able to tell his story at all. Eve's, of course, comes first in Book 4, and hers becomes the source material Adam needs. In Book 4, immediately after we first meet Adam and Eve launches into her tale of origin. Unlike Adam, Eve wastes no time after waking, romping through nature, before using her mind and wondering, quote, what I was, whence thither brought, and how. It's line 451. While Adam operates, quote, by quick instinctive motion for 13 lines before he wonders who I was, or where, or from what cause, Eve immediately tries to construct a narrative of her origin. Like Adam, she too searches nature for an interlocutor. However, while Adam looks up to the sky, Eve looks over to a nearby lake and sees herself. And I'm going to quote the lines from 456 to 465, because I'm going to unpack them a bit. I thither went with inexperienced thought and laid me down on the green bank to look into the clear, smooth lake that seemed to me another sky. As I bent down to look, just opposite, a shape within the watery gleam appeared, bending to look on me. I started back, it started back, but pleased I soon returned, pleased it returned as soon, with answering looks of sympathy and love. Eve too goes in search of an adequate interlocutor, but finds herself. In other words, Eve begins her consciousness looking for and finding the ideal interlocutor. She experiences none of the disconnection Adam does when he asks the sun a question and gets no response. Words are not yet necessary. Not only does her interlocutor, her own image, appear whenever she looks for it, but it sends her answering looks of sympathy and love. The answers it gives her are visual. The presence, gaze, and reciprocal emotion of her interlocutor are all she needs. Eve's consciousness is initially formed as complete and pleased with itself. Between Adam and Eve's narrative appears a distinction between the recognition of causality and the need to narrate it. In his story of origin, Adam wakes with an if-then sense of things. The longer he finds no one to help him fill in the blanks, the more his anxiety builds. In her story of origin, Eve also wakes with this if-then sense, beginning her narrative recognizing that she was thither brought from somewhere, somehow. However, unlike Adam, she does not need an interlocutor with whom to verbally reconstruct the sequence that leads up to this moment. She does not need someone to teach her how to construct a story. Thus, while Adam is forced into a linguistic state by his mounting unease, while he is compelled to address the sun in an attempt to have someone to help him concoct a narrative, Eve is wholly satisfied with the answering looks she gets from her own image. She is wholly satisfied with unnarrated causality. In this way, Eve's story offers the radical possibility of never needing to tell a story at all. Of course, this situation cannot stand. God's plan, as we know from Adam's story, is to have humans wake up anxious. Thus, Eve must be taught how to tell a story, and she must be made anxious that no one will listen. Otherwise, without this fear, there's nothing to keep Eve in line, following rules and bearing consequences. Without this fear, Eve is free to think outside the box, to be creative and innovative. Without this fear, Eve truly embodies free will and is not substantially different than God himself. Milton gives lip service to this divine plan by having Eve awake alone despite Adam being nearby. Yet by letting her find her image in the lake right away, Milton circumvents the moment she will start feeling anxious. Instead of glorying in her physicality initially like Adam does, Eve uses her, quote, inexperienced thought immediately and discerns herself. The divine plan is foiled. And the blame for its failure is foisted upon Eve's shoulders by a disembodied voice, again, we don't know whose, that interrupts her wordless self-satisfaction to warn her with words, the first one spoken yet. This is, I'm again citing a passage starting at line 467. What there thou seest, fair creature, is thyself. With thee it comes and goes. But follow me, and I will bring thee where no shadow stays thy coming and thy soft embraces. He whose image thou art, him thou shalt enjoy and separately thine. To him shalt bear multitudes like thyself, and thence be called mother of human race. While Adam is pushed to speak out loud because of his need for answers, discovering language himself, the voice must force language on Eve. It's significant that it's a voice, which is its number one characteristic is that it speaks words. In so doing, the voice tries to reboot her system by taking Eve's knowledge of her own image. He says, what thou seest is thyself, with thee it comes and goes, and reassigning it to Adam, he whose image thou art. To put it another way, the voice tries to deny Eve's original knowledge of her image and instead assert her derivation from Adam's. Yet Eve's ability to create outside the narrative context into which Adam is already locked is already in the bag. Even in the voice's attempt to reboot Eve's mind, there is a sense of its futility. For Eve will never forget these first moments. She begins that passage by referring to it as that day I oft remember. And we can also see this clearly by the fact that she is telling the story now in Book 4. And the voice seems to know this, which is why it engages in persuasion to get Eve to go to Adam, by telling her that if she goes to him, she will bear multitudes like thyself, thus appealing to her contentment within the closed space of herself in which she resides in those waking moments when she sees her own image and is happy with it. In other words, the voice hopes to win her over with the image of little Eve's running rampant through creation. By acting upon her rhetorically, the voice implicitly acknowledges two things. Firstly, that she does not need to listen to its command, since she has everything she needs simply by staring at her reflection. And secondly, that she is not yet aware of consequences. The voice doesn't even try to threaten her, for instance. For an awareness of consequences would imply that she knew of or cared about narrative, which we've seen she doesn't yet. Critics often view Eve as trapped within a patriarchal system, brought to life by a masculine god to fulfill Adam's needs. Julia Walker, for instance, argues that when she looks at herself in the lake, Eve never recognizes that image as herself. She is told by the